Hello everyone and welcome back. In this lesson I'm going to do a quick sort of behind the scenes-ish look at some work I did to prepare the demo data for the last lecture. Now I wanted to show you this in the last lecture, but it wasn't really the main point of the last lecture and I felt like it would be distracting. So we'll show you it here. If you happen to catch it, there's one attribute, the one that we used to dissolve the features in the last lecture, was all lowercase while all the rest of the attributes were all uppercase. And that's because I added this state GeoID field myself. And I did that because I needed a common attribute to dissolve on in order to get the states out of the county data here. Now, the county GeoIDs are really the identifiers that we use for all this. And the first two digits of the GeoID I happen to know are the state ID from the census data. And if you didn't know this information, you would have found it out when you downloaded the data and looked at the metadata yourself. So don't think that it's just some mystery that I know this. I know it from looking at metadata. So knowing that the first two digits are the state ID, I needed to get a new field that had just that state ID so that I could dissolve on it. Well, how did I do that? That's what I want to show you right now. Well, as you can guess, I added a field. We'll just do it even though we already have it here. We'll do it on this same table. And I'll add a field and we'll call it state ID in this case. And since I want to lead it with a 0, in this case, I'm going to need to make it a text field instead of an integer field, because this 06 is actually a text ID. And I can confirm by looking at the GeoID field's properties to see what data type it is. It's a string. So make it a text field, and then I know that I only need 2 characters of length. So I'm just going to make it length of 2 to save some space, and I'll click OK. Now, use the tool that you're all very familiar with at this point, the field calculator, to populate the values of our new field. So I'll go to field calculator, and I'm going to switch the parser type to Python up here. And generally speaking, we want to get the GeoID field's contents into the state ID field, except we just want to modify it a bit. So let's start with that. I'm just going to double click and put GeoID into the state ID field. And now I'm going to use some Python specific syntax here to subset it just to the first 2 characters. And that's that I'm going to use the syntax for iterable objects called slicing. And I put 2 square brackets in, so I'll just space them out for a second so you can see them. And in between, I'm putting a colon because I'm going to specify a range of values from the start to the finish on each side of this. So I know that I want to begin at the very beginning of the string, the sequence of letters, and so I'll put 0 because that's the index of the first item I want to include. And then I'm going to end after the second character, so I'll put 2, and it doesn't include that number. So if it's including items 0 and 1, which is how it sequences these things, it starts on 0. It includes items 0 and 1, but it doesn't include item 2 in this case. It's non-inclusive of the last item, but it's inclusive of the first item here. So basically this syntax now says, take the field GeoID, and since it's text, take the items 0 through 2, not inclusive of 2, and put it into the state ID field here. So if I run this now by clicking OK, I get output that looks like the other one here as well. So it takes the first 2 letters of the GeoID field, or the first 2 numbers here, and pops them into the state ID field as expected. And that's how I added the attribute that let me dissolve on the state ID. Now, there's nothing super magical about that, and there's a whole lot of other Python specific syntax you can do in the field calculator. So really what I wanted to show you is, 1, there's a lot of power in the field calculator when you start scripting Python in it, and 2, this is the kind of data manipulation that's really common. I do a lot of this in prepping the demos, and it's really important to build your skill base of all these little tips and tricks that you can use in order to prepare and kind of mangle your data around in different ways in order to get it to work the way you need it to. Okay, that's it for this lecture. In this lecture, I just showed you how I prepared some data for the previous lecture on dissolving by using the field calculator and a Python tool called slicing to take the attributes from one field and pop them into another field, but modify them slightly. Okay, see you next time.